So there was a really important article that came out in the website Truthout, and by a neighbor of mine, actually, Jess Lenore. And this article, just as Andy's interesting article and interesting fact related to the way in which the state of Maryland and Maryland politicians are profiting or propping up the horse racing industry, and that is a surprise to many of us. Many of us may also be surprised to learn that the retirement fund of the public employees of the state of Maryland, which is controlled by an appointee of the legislature, the treasurer, and the comptroller, a statewide elected official, as well as appointees of the governor and appointees of two of the institutional state affiliate unions, is investing to the tune of tens of millions of dollars in Israel bonds at a time when Israel was engaged in some of the most atrocious genocidal acts and ethnic cleansing of its entire history, some of the most intense periods. And so state public employee workers, especially teachers and others around the state, have been organizing for many months to pressure the state government to divest from these bonds, which are being used to prop up the Israeli government, as well as to arm the IDF. That's what bonds do. They're a financial vehicle for governments to raise money when they're in a pinch, and they're not particularly profitable. So they don't serve public sector workers, but much more importantly, they run totally counter to the values of most public sector workers, in that they're being used to fund the indiscriminate bombing of Palestinian civilians, the killing of public sector workers in Gaza, teachers in Gaza, children in Gaza are being killed. And the decision of state elected and appointed officials to buy these bonds makes all public sector workers and really all Marylanders complicit in these actions. Complicit unless we stand up and do something about it and fight for divestment, which is the goal of a campaign called Break the Bonds. And so this article in Truthout, you should check it out, is really detailing early stages of that organizing. This is the first article. They chose a really trusted and trustworthy journalist to publish it. And so this was kind of their coming out article after many months of organizing.
And then there's this one. So yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Andy. Yeah.
So what I think is interesting is Owen and I have been talking about that bond story for a little while, and we've been hearing from folks like a person that I met on Monday who's involved in that Break the Bonds campaign and was excited to hear us talk about it. And Katie, if you're on the show tonight, we're glad to have you here, and we're glad to have you join this conversation with us. But what we found really interesting was that while the state of Maryland is trying to not divest in that way, they were really happy to release this statement from the state treasurer and the comptroller about how when they got to have a vote in the state of Maryland's investment in Elon Musk's $1 trillion pay package, they wanted to underscore a commitment to responsible investment, shareholder accountability, and long-term fiscal health of the financial markets. And I just think the juxtaposition between these two things is really fascinating, because at the one hand, they're telling a bunch of state workers who don't want their money invested, their retirement money invested in genocide, that this is not the right way to do this. And at the other hand, they're grandstanding about how they denied Elon, took Maryland's vote and denied Elon Musk tried to deny Elon Musk his $1 trillion package.
Yeah, I think it's frankly hypocritical to say that we don't use the retirement funds and the retirement futures of public sector workers to do politics, when clearly they use it to do politics that are friendly to the Democratic Party. and friendly to their national interests and their ambitions for higher office in Maryland. But on the other hand, when state workers come to them in earnest and say, hey, we don't want our pensions invested in genocide and ethnic cleansing, they say, oh, well, we don't do politics with that fund. Well, that's not politics. One, it's a bad investment, and two, it's murder and it's ethnic cleansing, and that's not political. That's international law that we're talking about. That's the values of our state, which many of our statewide elected officials are so quick to tout the Maryland values. You know, where in our Maryland values is bombing schools and hospitals, right? We shouldn't be involved in that. We shouldn't be subsidizing that. And this is only one of several ways in which the state of Maryland supports Israel and Israeli apartheid. And we'll get into that later in the show.
Yeah, so some key facts for this question. I think, Owen, I think your breakdown of that was excellent. I think the explanation of how the bonds are working and why this is an unethical and wrong way to use public sector employees' retirement benefits was excellent. And I want to get into these key facts about this story here. So 420,000 public sector workers whose pension and retirement funds are invested in Israel. $73.7 million is the amount of public investment in Israeli bonds for the state of Maryland. Many of them purchased as late as December of 2024. And the three most important global credit ratings agencies have all downgraded Israel's credit rating after the war and the genocide was raging on, because they realized it was a bad investment. So I think what these things say together is not only are our public sector workers being forced to subsidize this bad investment, but we don't have that much money there, and it's not gaining that much money. It's not as if it is actually helping their retirement funds grow significantly. It's probably hurting their retirement funds. But this is because the state of Maryland wants to align itself with the state of Israel, and this is a way to prove that it wants to do that.
Yeah, I think there's another piece to this, especially that 73.7 million, and with purchases late into 2024, that's really important. And that's the accountability piece. So there are people who sit on this board that oversees this. And then when they're pressured, they say, well, we don't actually make the decisions, right? People below our level, staff, make the decisions. And it's like, well, what's the point of an oversight board if you don't do oversight? And if there's anything that an oversight board should exist for, it's to prevent investment in genocide, right? That's not one of those like, well, this was a tough decision, we had to make a tough call. It's like, no, you invested in genocide and you oversaw staff that consciously chose to invest in this as bombs were raining down on children in Gaza. And it is shameful, and there should be accountability at the highest levels of state government for it. And it needs to be, I think that what the Truthout article does is it starts to move that accountability from a private small group pressure meetings, which can be effective and can be a first or early step in any organizing campaign to leverage change. What the Truthout article does is it lays some of these facts out in a very clear and easy way to understand. And if you're listening now, you can contact your state elected officials. You can contact the governor and lieutenant governor and treasurer and comptroller. And if you're a union member in in AFSCME or MSEA, you can contact them as well and say, hey, I don't want my state, or I don't want my retirement fund, if that's your retirement fund, invested in Israel bonds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the interesting juxtaposition with the Musk decision is they made the right decision. Like the fact that we're invested in Tesla in the first place is a thing that we should be asking about, right? But I think when presented with that decision, they made the ethical decision in that case. They made the decision, which was the state of Maryland is going to use the power of its vote to not support this. I would like to see them make the ethical decision to divest from Tesla as well. But it was like they made one very good decision that they probably drew too much attention to. And I do think that that decision opens the space for this to be treated differently. And I think when people talk to them, you should be saying, why are you celebrating ethical investment in this one area that is very popular with your Democratic donors and the national narrative, but you're shirking the responsibility for it in other areas?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
And I'd want to add too, they did not make this ethical decision in a vacuum. I think early on with some of the No Kings protests or some of the protests at Tesla dealerships, I was a little bit skeptical. I said, "Oh, what is this really going to do? What is the objective here?" But clearly, all those protests at Tesla dealerships and all those No Kings protests and the oligarchy, no oligarchy tour that Bernie and others went on, obviously it resonated on some at the level of state elected officials in Maryland. With this vote on the Elon Musk compensation package, right? And it showed that when you protest in public and when you have a general target, if there's enough attention and enough energy, that a specific policy, a constructive and specific policy objective can emerge out of that critique, even if the critique is more general. And so imagine, some of the biggest protests in recent years have been in solidarity with Palestine. And often there were specific demands and other times just outrage and rage. And both are legitimate. And now we've seen organizers coalesce around this specific goal. And so I wonder, just like there were protests outside the Musk dealership, are there going to be protests outside the offices of elected officials who are making decisions or overseeing staff who are making decisions to invest in Israel bonds?
Yeah, I mean, and there should be. And if you are somebody who is interested in one of those protests, then you're not finding a good outlet for it, reach out to us at ideas@gogreen2026.com, and we'll work with you to figure out how to make this happen. Because I think the point that like I say, I just think the juxtaposition of this is really important, right? Because it shows that when pressed, they understand the necessity to make ethical investments decisions, and it shows that they have the ability to do so and that they have a platform to talk about it when they do so. And it would be great if we could see them make such a pronouncement on this issue, so that there's a statement coming out from the comptroller's office and the state government office that says we've taken the 73 point in order to better serve those 420,000 public sector workers, we've taken the $73.7 million and not only put it into a better investment, but a more ethical investment.
Mm-hmm.